I stood outside the wedding tent, stomach growling, watching servers walk past me with plates of food I had paid for. My son's new wife had whispered something in his ear just before dinner, and now I wasn't even on the guest list. "We can't." "Make exceptions," the caterer said, avoiding my eyes. The same caterer I'd written a check to. So I raised a son who won't feed the woman who sacrificed everything for him? But he didn't know I had one final surprise planned. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. I wasn't always the woman sitting outside a tent, ignored by the child she raised. No, once, I was his everything. My name is Linda, and I've lived most of my life in the same small town in upstate New York. I worked as a nurse for 32 years at the local hospital, mostly night shifts, mostly in silence. My friends used to say I had the soul of a lantern, quiet, steady, always burning, even when no one noticed. I lost my husband when I was 34. Daniel was only 7. A car accident. I still remember the way he clung to my sleeve in that hospital hallway when I told him his daddy wouldn't be coming home. His lower lip trembled, and he asked, "Does that mean I'm your little man now?" He became mine, and I became his. I didn't date again. Not seriously. There was always work, always bills. But mostly, there was Daniel. Everything I did, every corner I cut, every overtime shift I took, it was for him. I packed his lunches with notes inside. I sat in the bleachers at every game, even when he didn't play. I stayed up helping him with school projects I didn't understand, looking things up in library books because I didn't know how to use the internet back then. We had a tradition. Every Sunday night, we'd make pancakes, sit on the couch, and talk about our week. Sometimes he'd fall asleep on my shoulder while I read from the newspaper out loud, just to sound like Dad. He'd say, "One day, I'll make you proud, Ma." And I'd always answer, "You already have." When he got into college on partial scholarship, I took out a small loan and covered the rest. I told him not to worry about money, just focus on school. I still remember the day we moved him into the dorm. I cried the whole drive home. My arms felt empty, but he called every day back then, sometimes twice. He'd ask for advice, tell me about his classes, his roommates, even heartbreaks. And I'd sit in my tiny kitchen with the landline pressed to my cheek, smiling like he was sitting right across from me. After he graduated, he landed a decent job and moved to the city. I was so proud. He sent flowers on my birthday, called on holidays, came home for Christmas, always with gifts and hugs. That's why I never saw the shift happen, not at first. He met Chelsea 2 years ago, told me she was classy, elegant, different. I was happy for him. He deserved someone who could love him as much as I had. When he brought her home for dinner, I made my famous roast chicken and mashed potatoes. Chelsea picked at the plate, like it was a science experiment. "I try not to eat carbs," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Still, I tried. I bought scented candles, nicer wine, even changed my hairstyle after she commented that I looked very traditional. I didn't take it as an insult at the time. I just wanted her to like me. But little by little, I started feeling displaced. Like a relic in a museum she was politely tolerating. Daniel stopped calling as often, said he was busy with work. The Sunday pancake tradition faded into memory, and when I offered to help them plan the wedding, Chelsea gave me a cold smile and said, "Oh, we've got it covered, but thank you." Still, I offered to pay for things, quietly. A floral arrangement here, the catering deposit, the venue's security fee when their final quote came in over budget. I didn't want recognition. I just wanted to be useful, to be part of it, and for a while, I convinced myself that was enough. But now I know better. I wasn't helping to be helpful. I was buying my seat at a table I never should have had to pay for. I gave him everything I had, my time, my love, my money, but nothing prepared me for the moment he stopped seeing me altogether. The first real sign something was off came during brunch. Chelsea had invited me to a restaurant in the city, one of those trendy rooftop spots where the chairs were white leather and the waitstaff wore black gloves. I arrived 10 minutes early, clutching the gift I'd brought, a photo album I'd made for them, full of baby pictures of Daniel with space in the back for their wedding photos. Chelsea glanced at it briefly before tucking it under her chair, like it was a lost menu. "I'm so glad you could make it," she said, sipping from a glass of something pink and overpriced. "I know how hard it must be for you to get away from everything," I smiled. "Well, I'm retired now. I have all the time in the world." "Oh, right. That's lovely. Daniel said you're in that small house near the old railway station." "Yes?" There was something about the way she said that small house, like it had quotation marks around it, like it smelled of mildew and peeling wallpaper. She didn't mean to sound cruel. That was the worst part. She said it with the casual, unthinking cruelty of someone who'd never once had to clip a coupon or reuse a tea bag. I tried to stay gracious. I told her stories about Daniel growing up, about how he once tried to run away at age 9 with nothing but a box of cereal and a map he drew himself. She smiled politely, nodded, glanced at her phone. The photo album remained untouched until the waiter came to clear the table. She lifted it with 2 fingers and placed it in her oversized designer purse without a word. I remember walking home from the train that evening, heels biting into my feet, thinking, maybe I'm just being sensitive. But my instincts, the ones honed from years of observing patients, picking up on what wasn't said, told me something colder was forming between us. Over the next few months, Chelsea began to make herself the gatekeeper. If I wanted to reach Daniel, I had to go through her. At first, it was small things. I'd call and she'd answer, saying, "He's in the shower, I'll have him call back." But he never did. Then they started replying to texts as a shared voice. "We're doing well. We've been so busy. We, always we." I began to feel like a distant relative, not the woman who raised him on nothing but willpower and love. When the wedding planning began in earnest, I tried to insert myself gently. I sent links to venues I thought they might like, even offered to help with handmade decorations to save money, Chelsea replied once. "Thanks, Linda. We're aiming for something more upscale." She didn't say it rudely. She never did. Her tone was always sweet, civil, like someone gently moving a pawn across a chessboard while planning 10 moves ahead. Daniel, for his part, didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he didn't want to notice. He was smitten with her, glowing with pride whenever he talked about her accomplishments, her style, her connections. I understood. He wanted to prove something to the world, and maybe, deep down, to himself. I didn't blame him for falling in love. I blamed him for forgetting who caught him every time he fell before her. The first time he asked me for money, it was framed as a favor. "The florist Chelsea picked is incredible," he said. "But she's way over our budget. I didn't want to say no to her. Do you think you could spot me a few thousand? I'll pay you back after the honeymoon." I didn't hesitate. Not because I had the money, because I didn't. I dipped into the small inheritance my sister had left me. I figured, it's his wedding. It's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. The second time was the caterer's down payment. The third was the deposit on the venue. All in all, I gave nearly $17,000 to help them build their dream wedding. I never asked to be paid back. I never asked for recognition. But I did ask, just once, if I could be included in the planning. Chelsea responded in a text message. "Thank you for being so supportive. It really means a lot that you trust us to make decisions that reflect Daniel's new life." Daniel's new life. As if I was part of the old one, fading like wallpaper no one bothers to peel. A week before the wedding, I finally spoke to Daniel alone on the phone. I told him I was feeling distant, that I hoped he hadn't forgotten where he came from. There was a long pause. "Mom," he said finally, "you're always so emotional about everything. Can we just enjoy the moment for once?" It was the first time he'd called me too much. After all these years of being his rock, I'd become the weight he didn't want to carry. I had given him everything, yet somehow I was becoming the embarrassing shadow he didn't want cast over his perfect day. I didn't expect to be the center of attention at the wedding. I just wanted to feel like I belonged. But even before the big day arrived, it became clear. I wasn't part of this celebration. I was a logistical detail, an afterthought, something they'd politely thank at the end, like a sponsor no one knew existed. It started with the fittings. I had gone shopping, bought a soft lavender dress with matching heels and a tiny beaded clutch. It wasn't expensive, but it made me feel elegant. I sent a photo to Daniel asking, "Think this works for mother of the groom?" He never responded. 2 days later, Chelsea's mother, Diane, called me out of the blue. "Hi, Linda," she said, voice syrupy and sharp. "I just wanted to give you a heads up. The bridal party's wearing coordinated colors, dusty rose and gold. It might be best to stick with neutral tones so things don't clash in the photos." Photos. That's all I was now, a background element in a carefully curated Instagram reel. Still, I returned the dress. Found a champagne-colored one on clearance. It didn't fit quite right, but I made do. Diane began stepping into every role. I thought I'd play. She was listed as the primary contact on all the vendor forms. I found this out when the bakery called me by accident, asking about the final cake design. I told them I wasn't sure. "Oh," the woman said, confused. "We have you listed as the payer? We assumed—" I hung up before she could finish. I didn't want to cry over frosting. The final dress rehearsal was held at a country club just outside the city. I'd driven nearly 2 hours to be there. When I arrived, the wedding planner, a thin young man in tight pants and too much cologne, looked at me like I'd wandered in off the street. "And you are?" "I'm Daniel's mother," I said, smiling, holding a small gift bag for Chelsea. It was a vintage handkerchief from my own wedding day, embroidered with delicate lace. He flipped through his clipboard, then nodded awkwardly. "Right, sorry. We just weren't expecting everyone." I watched from the back as they rehearsed the ceremony. Chelsea walked down the aisle 3 times. Her mother adjusted her hair between each attempt, offered coaching on her posture, gave Daniel a tissue to dab his forehead. Not once did anyone ask me to step forward. When they paused for group photos, I tried to approach, but the photographer gestured for immediate family only. I stood behind a row of manicured hedges, pretending to check my phone while the flash went off. Later that night, I overheard Chelsea talking to a group of bridesmaids near the valet stand. I hadn't meant to listen, but the words hit me like stones. "She's harmless, just kind of depressing," Chelsea said, laughing softly. "Daniel feels guilty about her, but honestly, I don't think we need to worry." They all giggled. Another voice chimed in. "Will she be sitting with us during dinner?" Chelsea made a face. "No, she'll be at one of the back tables with the distant cousins. It's easier that way." Back tables. It's easier that way. Got in my car and drove home in silence, the handkerchief still in my purse. The week leading up to the wedding, no one called. No one asked how I was getting there, if I needed a ride, if I wanted to join the family for pre-wedding breakfast. I was alone with my memories, with my photo albums, with the mounting receipts on my desk. When the final bill came in from the caterer, an extra $3,400 for unexpected guests, I paid it without comment. It was easier that way. The day before the ceremony, I tried calling Daniel. I just wanted to hear his voice. No answer. Not even a text. I stared at my phone, thumb hovering over the keyboard, unsure if I should say, "Break a leg" or "Don't forget about me." I typed nothing. The morning of the wedding, I put on my champagne dress, curled my hair, and dabbed on the perfume Daniel used to say reminded him of fresh laundry. I left the handkerchief behind. I knew she wouldn't want it. I arrived early, but no one greeted me. I found my name on the table chart, table 18, tucked in the far corner of the reception hall near the restrooms. Across from a cousin I hadn't seen in 15 years and someone named Uncle Greg I didn't recognize. I didn't complain. But inside, something in me buckled. It wasn't just exclusion anymore, it was exile. I had spent my life building a home for my son, but in the home he was now building, there wasn't a single room left for me. The music was already playing when I walked into the reception hall. Soft piano melodies, white roses blooming from the ceilings, flickering candles floating in water. It was beautiful. I'll give them that. But beauty has a way of cutting deeper when it comes wrapped in silence. I hovered near my table for a while, unsure what to do. No one came to say hello. I saw Daniel across the room, looking dashing in his tuxedo. He was laughing with Chelsea's father, arms around her mother. His face glowed the way it used to when I made his favorite casserole on his birthday. Only now I wasn't even a footnote in his joy. A waiter came by, dropping menus on the surrounding tables. I tried to catch his eye. "Excuse me," I said. "I didn't get a—" He glanced down, hesitated, then leaned closer. "Ma'am, I've been instructed that this section isn't part of the formal dinner service. I'm so sorry." I blinked. "I'm sorry what? I'm his mother." He looked uncomfortable. "There's a grazing table outside with small bites." My stomach clenched. I hadn't eaten since breakfast. I thought I'd have dinner here. I paid for dinner here. I stepped back, heart pounding, suddenly aware that every face around me was turning slightly away. Not out of malice. No, it was worse. It was indifference. I was invisible. That's when the flashbacks started coming. Uninvited. Unstoppable. Daniel at 5, running into the kitchen with muddy shoes, holding up a dandelion like it was a diamond. "Here, Mama," he said, breathless. "For you." Daniel at 12, curled up next to me after a nightmare, whispering, "I don't want to grow up if it means you won't be there." Daniel at 17, standing in front of the mirror in his graduation gown, cheeks flushed with pride. "You did this for me," he said that day. "Everything I am is because of you." Where was that boy now? Where was the boy who used to write, "I love you, Mom," on sticky notes and leave them on my bathroom mirror? I stepped outside, the cold night air slapping my face like a wake-up call. The heels I wore, a last-minute splurge just to feel fancy, dug into the gravel. I found a bench near the catering tent and sat, listening to the muffled sounds of clinking glasses, laughter, and the toasts I wasn't asked to give. My stomach growled again. Not just from hunger, but from something deeper. Starvation of dignity, of identity, of belonging. That's when the caterer walked by. Mike, I think his name was. I recognized him from the walkthrough I'd attended alone when Chelsea and Daniel had other commitments. I'd written his company a check from my personal account. It had taken me 3 weeks to shuffle bills to make the payment work. I stood up. "Excuse me," I said. "Is it possible to get a plate? I haven't had anything to eat, and I helped cover the cost of tonight." His face changed, awkward, slightly embarrassed. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I was given a strict list, no exceptions." I stared at him. For a second, I thought maybe I'd misunderstood. But no, it was deliberate. They didn't forget me. They'd made sure I was left out. I sat back down, slowly. My hands trembled. My mouth went dry. For a long time, I just watched the shadows inside the tent flicker against the canvas, and then I cried. Not quietly, not politely, but in sharp, shaking sobs that bent me in half. I cried for the girl I once was, the one who thought love guaranteed loyalty. I cried for the mother who gave up birthdays, dinners, vacations, and every ounce of her youth. And I cried for the boy who once said, "You're my hero," and now stood somewhere inside that glowing tent pretending I didn't exist. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you loved more than yourself? Let me know in the comments. I'm listening. I don't remember driving home. I must have been on autopilot. But I do remember parking in my driveway, hands still clenched around the steering wheel, headlights washing over the brick wall like an interrogation lamp. My body felt foreign, like I was watching myself from above. I sat there in the car for over an hour. My dress wrinkled, my hair flattened, my mascara streaked. Then I reached into the passenger seat and picked up the wedding binder, the thick black folder I'd kept through all the months of planning. It held every receipt, every contract, every deposit. And slowly a new kind of feeling crept in. Not anger, not even sorrow. Clarity. As I stared at the receipts I'd saved with love, I realized if they could erase me from their story, then maybe it was time I rewrote mine. The next morning, I woke up with a headache that felt like it had been carved into my skull. I hadn't slept well, if at all. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that wedding tent glowing from the inside, full of people eating food I paid for, laughing around tables I was never meant to sit at. I saw Daniel's face, not angry or hateful, but indifferent. Cold in the way that only someone you once held to your chest can be. But instead of crying again, I did something else. I made tea, just like I did every morning when Daniel was growing up. Peppermint, no sugar, steeped long. I sat at my kitchen table with the wedding binder beside me, the pages still smelling faintly of the leather cover. For months, this binder had been a symbol of anticipation, a gift, a contribution. Now it was a record of my own erasure. I flipped through the pages slowly. There were the florist contracts, annotated with Chelsea's urgent requests, the revised seating chart, table, 18 circled in red, the menu selections I'd helped finalize after they couldn't decide on hors d'oeuvres. Every signature on every invoice had one thing in common: mine. I realized something then. They'd taken my money, my time, my help. But they couldn't take my name off the paperwork. It was all still mine. Every petal, every plate, every song on that DJ list Daniel never bothered to revise. I wasn't invisible. They had just hoped I'd stay silent. Later that afternoon, I opened my laptop and typed a short email to the photographer. "Hi, Stephanie. I just wanted to confirm that my email is still the primary on file for receiving the full wedding gallery. Please let me know when the link is available. Thank you again for your work. Linda, mother of the groom." It was a small thing, but it felt like planting a flag in ground I'd once abandoned. The reply came within the hour. Warm, professional. Avi. "Course, Linda. I've got your address saved and we'll send everything once we finish edits next week. It was such a lovely event. Thanks again for all your coordination on our first call. We couldn't have done it without you." I stared at those last words for a long time. We couldn't have done it without you. There were more emails after that, quiet confirmations from the vendors, gratitude, invoices, final statements. One by one, they each acknowledged me. Not Chelsea, not her mother. Me. No, it wasn't revenge. Not yet. But it was truth. And truth, when you've been starved of it, tastes better than any wedding meal. I didn't reach out to Daniel. I didn't call or text or ask for an explanation. For once, I let the silence sit there, unapologetic. Like a closed door he would have to knock on if he wanted back in. Instead, I found myself doing something I hadn't done in years. I went for a walk. Just a short one, down the tree-lined street where Daniel used to ride his bike with a red cape. Trailing behind him, I passed the old swing set, now rusting at the park entrance. Sat on a bench and watched as two kids kicked a soccer ball toward their tired-looking father, who offered high fives with the kind of enthusiasm only love can generate. I didn't cry this time. I just breathed. And when I got home, I made a list, not of people to confront or ways to make them sorry, but of things I loved and wanted to do again. Bake cinnamon rolls, join the church choir again, volunteer at the shelter downtown, refinish the dresser in the guest room, things I'd postponed for the boy who no longer saw me, things that didn't require anyone's permission. The next day, I drove into town and bought myself a bouquet. Bright sunflowers, loud, joyful. I didn't wait for someone to hand me flowers anymore. I handed them to myself. That night, I sat with the binder one last time. Taped to the inside cover was a faded photo. Daniel at 11, standing in front of our old Honda with a toothy grin and a sign that said, "We did it, Mom," after his first spelling bee win. I had forgotten I tucked it there. I stared at it, touched the worn edges, and whispered softly, "I did do it. All of it." And slowly, a thought began to bloom, unexpected, electric. They might have dismissed me, but I still held the story. And I still held the receipts. And maybe, just maybe, it was time he saw all of it. He may have given me the cold shoulder at his wedding, but soon my silence would speak louder than any toast he gave that night. Daniel didn't notice her absence right away. The wedding had been a blur of photos, dancing, and champagne flutes he didn't remember emptying. Chelsea was radiant, her smile flawless in every photo, her voice sugary and confident as she mingled with guests like she'd been born hosting galas. But when they got back to their hotel suite that night, something was off. "Did you see my mom before you left?" Daniel asked, loosening his tie. Chelsea didn't look up from her compact. "Your mom?" "Yeah. She kind of disappeared after dinner, I think. I didn't even get a picture with her." Chelsea shrugged. She probably left early. She looked tired. Tired? Daniel frowned. "She didn't eat. She said she wasn't hungry," Chelsea lied with the ease of someone who had lied before. Daniel paused, unsettled by a vague feeling he couldn't name. He dismissed it. There had been 100 guests, 1,000 moving pieces. Maybe he'd just missed her. He'd call her in the morning, but the morning came, and he didn't call, and she didn't either. They flew to St. Lucia for their honeymoon. Everything was perfect. The weather, the food, the ocean so blue it looked unreal. Chelsea posted curated snapshots online with captions like, "Wife mode activated," and "Nothing but bliss." But Daniel felt something nudge at him every time he checked his phone. No message from his mother, no safe travels text, no congratulations, not even a heart emoji. He told himself she was giving him space until the 5th day when the email arrived. It wasn't from her. It was from the wedding photographer. Subject: Gallery access. Daniel and Chelsea's wedding. He opened the link, smiling as the photos began to load. First looks, the ceremony, cake cutting. But when he clicked on the download permissions, his eyes narrowed. Primary client email, Linda Gray, 58 error. He blinked. Why would the gallery be linked to his mom's email? He scrolled through the credits. Coordinator, Linda Gray. Lead contributor, Linda Gray. Event sponsor, partial, L. Gray. His stomach dropped. He hadn't known. Chelsea had handled the emails, the paperwork, the payments. He texted her casually, "Hey, did my mom help with the gallery setup or something?" She replied with a thumbs-up emoji. Nothing else. Daniel sat in the resort lounge that evening, scrolling through his phone while Chelsea posed for yet another poolside selfie. He opened his email app and typed Linda into the search bar. Up popped dozens of confirmations, forwarded vendor emails, RSVP updates, even florist invoices with her name in the billing section. Paid, $3,000. Paid by Linda Gray. He felt his mouth go dry. Suddenly, his memory flickered to the moment she'd walked up at the rehearsal dinner, holding a small bag with something inside. He'd barely looked at her. Chelsea had taken the bag and set it aside without comment. He hadn't even asked what it was. That night, as Chelsea slept beside him, he opened the wedding binder she'd brought with them, just in case. He'd barely glanced at it before, always trusting Chelsea to manage the details. Now he flipped page by page, scanning notes and dates and printed receipts. Nearly all of them were signed in the same tidy cursive he'd grown up watching write his school permission slips. Linda Gray. Suddenly, everything came into focus. The reason the florist had been booked last minute, His mom. The reason they hadn't. Lost the venue when the payment was delayed. His mom. The soft-colored lights Chelsea insisted on, the ones his mom suggested in an email he just now found printed out and stuck between pages. And table 18. He pulled up the seating chart file. Chelsea had emailed him weeks before. Table 18, back corner. His mother. Alone. His jaw clenched. He didn't sleep much that night. When they landed back home, the first thing he did wasn't unpack. It was call her. She didn't answer. He left a voicemail. "Hey, Mom. It's me. I've been thinking. About you. I want to talk. Please call me back." No reply. He called again the next day. Still nothing. He walked past the wedding gifts in their hallway, beautiful, glittering boxes with ribbons and cards, and for the first time felt nothing but shame. He picked one up, unopened, and stared at the tag. To Daniel and Chelsea. May you never. Forget the ones who helped build your forever. Aunt M. The words felt like a mirror. On the third day back, he confronted Chelsea. "Did you know my mom paid for most of the wedding?" She blinked. "What?" "I saw the receipts, the contracts." "You never told me." Chelsea hesitated, then turned cold. "We needed help." She offered. "What was I supposed to do, say no?" Daniel stared at her, something deep in his gut twisting. "You sat her at the back and didn't feed her. She left without saying goodbye. She would have made it weird. You know how emotional she gets." He stepped back like he'd been slapped. "Don't talk about her like that." It was the first time he had ever raised his voice to her. The silence that followed was heavier than any vow they'd exchanged. He thought his mother had simply stepped away, but the truth was she'd been pushed out of frame. And now, she might not come back. The drive to his mother's house felt longer than usual. Daniel gripped the steering wheel tightly, the familiar back roads winding through early autumn trees. He had made this drive 100 times before, coming home from college, visiting during holidays, once just to show her his new car. But this time, he didn't know what kind of welcome was waiting for him. He hadn't spoken to her in almost 2 weeks. Not since the wedding, not since the emails, not since Chelsea had rolled her eyes and muttered, "Are you seriously making this a big deal?" He had left the house that morning without telling his wife where he was going. When he pulled into the driveway, he noticed something small but significant. The flower beds had been weeded. The porch was swept. A brand new wind chime hung near. The front door, catching the sunlight in soft glimmers. His mother was still living, still thriving, still moving forward, without him. He rang the doorbell, then hesitated. After a few seconds, the door opened. Linda stood there in a soft gray sweater and jeans, her hair pulled back, no makeup, eyes sharp and calm. Not angry, not tearful, just solid. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, she stepped aside. "If you're coming in, wipe your feet." The living room was warm, familiar, the same knitted blanket draped over the couch, the same bookshelf stacked, with family photo albums. But something in the air had shifted. Linda didn't offer coffee, didn't ask how he'd been. She simply sat down across from him and waited. Daniel cleared his throat. I know I should have come sooner. I've been thinking about you every day since the wedding." She said nothing. He pressed on. "I found the receipts, the invoices. You paid for so much. I didn't realize. I should have asked. I should have—" "You didn't want to know," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "That's not the same." Daniel flinched. "I thought." Chelsea was handling everything. She was handling keeping me quiet. "That's not the same either." He looked down at his hands. They didn't feel like his anymore. "I didn't mean to make you feel left out." Linda raised an eyebrow. "You didn't make me feel anything, Daniel. You acted I felt. That landed like a stone in his chest. I was proud of you, she continued. I still am. But that day, watching strangers eat while I sat outside, I never imagined that moment, not for my son. He swallowed hard. I didn't know they didn't serve you. You didn't ask. He opened his mouth to speak, then shut it. A beat passed, then another. I have a box, she said, rising from her chair. Wait here. She returned with a shoebox filled with folded notes, birthday cards, crayon drawings. He recognized his own handwriting on most of them. One note in particular stood out, written in green marker, misspelled words and all. You are the best. Mom ever. If anyone ever hurts you, I will punch them in the face. Love, your night forever. Daniel picked it up, his hands shaking. I kept everyone, Linda said softly. Even the ones you taped to the fridge. Even the one you wrote after your dad's funeral. He closed his eyes. I don't expect you to leave her, she continued. That's your life. But I needed you to see the distance, not just feel it when it's convenient. Daniel looked up. I'm sorry, Mom. I really, really am. She gave a small nod. Good, but I'm not ready to be the one who makes it okay for you again. The words weren't cruel. They were honest. For the first time in his life, Daniel realized something startling. He wasn't the center of her world anymore. And maybe that was the most painful part of all. They sat in silence for a while, the shoebox between them. Finally, Linda spoke again. You want to fix this? He nodded, hopeful. Then stop calling when you feel guilty. Start showing up when it's quiet. Pick up the phone on a random Tuesday. Ask how I am without waiting for a holiday. Daniel nodded again, slower this time. And don't come here expecting to be forgiven just because you finally see the cracks. He looked at her, tears gathering in his eyes. What if I want to earn it back? She leaned forward. Then you better start now. As he stood to leave, he hesitated at the doorway. Do you still have the photo album I gave you? Linda smiled for the first time. Yes, and I added a photo to the back last night. He blinked. Which one? She met his eyes. Me, sitting, outside the wedding tent, alone, looking forward. He opened his mouth to say something, but she gently closed the door before he could. He came seeking redemption, but what he found was a woman who had already rescued herself. The following Sunday, Daniel came back. No flowers this time. No grand apology. Just 2 cups of coffee in a cardboard tray and a grocery bag with cinnamon rolls from the bakery he remembered she used to like. Linda didn't say much when she opened the door, but she let him in. They sat at the kitchen table, the same one where he used to do homework while she sliced apples and reminded him to sit up straight. The air between them was still fragile, but it no longer felt frozen. I found that note, she said finally, the one you wrote when you were 12. Said you'd take care of me when I got old. He laughed softly, embarrassed. I meant it. She smiled faintly. I know you did. He didn't say it out loud, but he was thinking what she already knew. Somewhere along the way, he stopped keeping that promise. The visits became weekly. Sometimes he came after work with leftovers and stories. Other times, they just sat together in the living room watching old shows in comfortable silence. Linda didn't ask about Chelsea. She didn't need to. The answers showed up in Daniel's eyes. The first time he came alone, he'd said, Chelsea. Had a work event. The second time, it was a headache. The third time, he didn't offer an excuse. He just said, she doesn't ask about you. And Linda, stirring sugar into her tea, replied, that doesn't surprise me. A month after the wedding, Linda was volunteering again, reading to kids at the library on Tuesdays and helping organize food donations at the church pantry. Her calendar, once painfully empty, now had scribbled notes and smiley face stickers left by a group of local kids who called her Miss L. She didn't wait for Daniel's calls anymore, but she answered when they came. She didn't check social media for photos of his life, because she had one of her own again. Still, one evening, Daniel showed up holding a framed picture, just the two of them, in front of the floral wedding backdrop. I asked the photographer for this. He said, handing it to her, "Thought you should have at least one from that day." She looked down at the photo. Her smile was tight in the picture, her hand resting on his chest like she wasn't sure if she should be touching him at all. But still, it was a photo of her choosing to show up. That counted for something. Then came the real unraveling. Chelsea had always been composed, calculated, elegant, but even she couldn't maintain a mask forever. Daniel came over one day, more withdrawn than usual. He barely touched his coffee, just stared at the bookshelf like it held the answer to a question he didn't know how to ask. "What is it?" Linda finally said. He rubbed the back of his neck. "We had a fight." Linda stayed quiet. She said, "I've changed since the wedding. That I'm becoming too sensitive, too emotional." "Too much like your mother?" Linda asked, eyebrows raised. Daniel exhaled, then laughed bitterly. "Pretty much. They didn't say anything else for a while. They didn't have to." 2 months after the wedding, they separated. There was no screaming, no spectacle. Chelsea moved into a condo owned by her parents. Daniel stayed in the apartment. They told friends it was a mutual pause. But deep down, Daniel knew. It was the consequence of a slow betrayal that neither of them could undo. Not because of the wedding, but because of the silences after. At Christmas, Daniel came to Linda's house early. He helped her set the table. Poured cider, lit candles. They ate quietly, then moved to the couch with a tin of butter cookies and a pile of blankets. As the fire crackled, Daniel leaned his head against her shoulder like he hadn't since he was a teenager. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" she asked. "For not giving up on me, even when I gave up on you." She didn't cry. She'd already done all her crying. Now was the season for grace. Have you ever had to walk away from someone to find yourself again? Share your story below. I read every one. I used to think a mother's love was supposed to be invisible. That, if you did it right, if you gave enough, bent enough, loved enough, you wouldn't need to be thanked, or remembered, or seen. But now I understand. Invisibility has a cost. Because when you make yourself small to make others feel big, one day they forget you were ever standing tall to begin with. I don't regret helping with the wedding. Not $1, not 1 hour. I gave from love. I showed up when no one asked. I poured myself into something that was never mine to keep, not because I wanted credit, but because I wanted connection. And while I didn't get a place at the table, that day I built the table. Every petal, every light, every song. My touch was there, even if no one acknowledged it. That used to break me. Now it empowers me, because it means I mattered, and I always did. The truth is, motherhood isn't a job that ends when they stop holding your hand. It's a bond that stretches, sometimes too far, sometimes until it frays, but it never quite snaps. I don't expect Daniel to understand everything. He has a long road ahead of him, and I can't walk it for him anymore. That's okay. What matters is he sees me again, not as a background character, but as a whole person, a woman, a mother, a name on the receipts and a face in the photos. I'm no longer waiting for an invitation to his life. I've opened the door to mine. These days, I spend my time volunteering, baking, laughing with friends, and saying no when something doesn't feel right. I wear colors I like. I speak up more. I no longer worry about being too much. If someone finds my warmth overwhelming, they're welcome to step into the shade. Daniel still visits. Not every day, not like before. But when he does, he listens now. He asks questions. He brings stories. And most importantly, he brings himself. Sometimes we look through old photo albums together, and I'll say, "That was your first day of school," or "That's the blanket you dragged around for 3 years." He always laughs. Then he always says, "You remember everything." I do, because I was everything for a long time. And now, I'm everything for me. People like to say, "You did your job, he's grown." But what they don't say is that once you raise someone, you have to learn how to raise yourself again. And that part is harder. You have to rediscover your voice, your rhythm, your place in the world that isn't defined by sacrifice or proximity to someone else's spotlight. But when you do, there's a power in that no one can take from you, not even your own child. So to every mother watching this, every parent, every giver, every soul who's ever been forgotten at the feast they helped prepare, this is what I want to tell you. You are not a burden. You are not disposable. You are not too sensitive, too emotional, too dramatic. You are seen. You are valid. You are still here. And being here, fully, wholly, without apology, is the most beautiful gift you can give yourself. I didn't lose my son. I just stopped losing myself in the process of loving him. And when I stood back up, when I stopped chasing after the seat they wouldn't give me, that's when he finally looked back and saw who had been holding him up all along. If you're watching this and something inside you stirred, I hope you remember this. You don't need applause to matter. You don't need an invitation to exist. And you never, never have to shrink to fit into someone else's life. Sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go of who you were, so you can become who you were meant to be all along. Thank you for listening. You weren't just an audience. You were witnesses to my healing, and that means more than you'll ever know. If you ever feel unseen, remember this: your love built empires, and no one can erase that.